budget discussion.
This is really an opportunity for board members to ask questions that they might have identified as they went through the budget, as well as to offer any suggestions as we begin to administratively look at cuts to the preliminary budget. Mr. Marnell did receive some questions prior to the meeting so that we could make this a little more efficient. So Jim, do you want to start maybe just moving through some of those, and then as there might be more discussion points, we'll just follow suit.
Mr. Tantlinger asked that we take a look at two items: retirement expenditures and health insurance expenditures. I passed out copies of those tonight for you. Are there any particular?
No, I just want those percentages and increases.
Yes, the retirement projection for next year is for the district 4.325%, which we have budgeted.
And Mr. Tantlinger asked that we go back to the 05-06 school year forward, which we did. I've attached the details that go into the numbers, but for the 05-06 school year, we expended $253,105, and the state retirement rate for the district was 2.345%. For the 06-07 school year, we expended $346,287, and the retirement rate that year was 3.23%. For the 07-08 school year, we expended $350,696, and the rate was 3.565%. They dropped the rate for 08-09. We expended $279,662. The rate was 2.38%. There was a very small adjustment for 09-10. They raised the rate to 2.39%. We expended $312,380. For the 10-11 school year, we have projected expenditures of $335,104 at a rate of 2.82%. And for next year, 11-12, we have budgeted $505,713 with the current rate that has been set at 4.325%. And of course, that rate is always adjustable by the state legislature, and that's a rate that they have changed on and off over the years.
Is that a firm rate for next year? You've been given that by the state?
At this time, yes.
So that's a $170,000 increase, which is one bill, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a fixed expense we cannot quantify in any way.
I would call it the rate fixed unless they change it. The expenditure, I would call it a quasi-fixed cost because, again, it's dependent on the number of employees that you have employed. So right now, the first draft of the budget doesn't reflect any early retirements or any layoffs. So if that makes...
The current number of employees in the district?
Yes, that's correct. And then we did the same thing with health insurance. We get our health insurance through the Westmoreland Public Schools Health Consortium, and we went back to 05-06 and we laid out the costs for each year and the different rates that were imposed, be they the old indemnity health insurance rate or the current PPO rate. For next year, we have a projected budget of $2,856,000. Which right now is 10% higher than what we have budgeted this year. However, the latest word from the Health Consortium is that they're looking at lowering the initial projection of 10% down to the 5 to 7.5% range. But we will not know that for sure until hopefully our meeting next month in March. Hopefully we'll have a firm rate established. Once we do, then we can adjust those numbers. But we were instructed to use the high-end 10% number, which is what we did for the first draft. And as you can see, just those two items are two big ticket items. You're talking 3.3 almost $3.4 million between those two benefit categories. Mrs. Hutchinson had asked about fixed costs. Of course, terminology fixed is always debatable, especially when you try to apply it to a Pennsylvania public school system. From my standpoint, there are only two items that are definitely fixed, and those are fixed because of one, our debt service, our principal and interest on our loans. That's fixed by loan covenants, and next year we have budgeted $2,772,000 in that category, and of course we have a legal tax repayment agreement with the Bethlehem Homes Association of $25,000. And again, the rest of the items are either quasi-fixed or semi-variable, however you want to look at it. Again, it depends on the level of service that is offered. Again, how many employees are retained, or how many bus runs are kept, etc. Mrs. Hutchinson had asked for a chart on real estate transfer taxes. I don't know if I passed out the chart to everybody or not, but I do have a number of copies here, which I'll start here. Then there will be plenty left over for anyone in the public who wants to grab a copy. But again, real estate transfer tax, or most people know it, the deed transfer tax, that's the 1% tax. That's part of that category of what's been called nuisance taxes. Since 1965, when they passed Act 511, the deed transfer tax is 1%, and it's split. The school systems get 1/2 of 1%, and the local municipality gets the other 1/2 of 1%. And it's always been a moving target to try to hit. Again, it's based on folks out there buying and selling property. So, as you can see in the chart, the blue graph, the blue bar is the actual receipts. The red bar behind it is the amount that was forecasted. As you can see, we had two up years in 04-05 and 05-06. 06-07, there was a significant dip that year. 07-08, there was a dramatic increase again. 08-09, when the housing market, or the real estate market bubble burst, as you can see, there was a big hit there. There was a partial recovery in 09-10, and I see a somewhat partial recovery projected for this year. However, we're certainly not going to make the forecast that was projected there. So for next year, 11-10, I went extremely conservative based on where we're at this year, and hopefully things will settle out in the general economy in the world, that folks will be able to buy and exchange properties at a more predictable rate, as we saw in the past. So that is the chart on the real estate transfer tax. I also passed out tonight a copy of the state budget. We have to take our detailed budget, that phone book, so to speak, and convert it into the state format. I know there was some comments made on the blog sites about a couple of the schedules that's in this budget. And again, we presented a preliminary budget in January following the Act 1 timeline to theoretically balance the budget as it is, would take a $16.5 million tax increase. And that's reflected on the detailed schedules that's in this preliminary budget. I know folks had mentioned Schedule C1 and C2, which is just the state format of telling you that, oh yeah, by the way, your projected millage rate is higher than your index of the 1.4%, which we knew. This format going in like this then allows the Department of Education to open up what's called the referendum exception system, which we just got notified, I think it was Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, that it is open, and I'll be finalizing those worksheets that I had passed out at a prior meeting that showed those unofficial referendum exceptions. We'll be turning those into official referendum exceptions, and those are due on March 3rd, so that's what, Thursday. I know there was some comment regarding you can't seek a referendum exception because of cyber school expenses, and that's correct. What the referendum exceptions look like, obviously the first one is on the difference in special education costs. So that is an allowable exception. There's also the exception on retirement contribution increase. Again, that is a legal exception that you can apply for. There's also the grandfather debt exception. So that is another one that we would qualify for. And then there's the final one is called maintenance of selected revenues. So there are those four categories that we definitely would qualify for. But again, there's nothing chiseled in stone. Doesn't mean the school board is going to go for those that amount of millage that's allowed by those exceptions, but that does give you the flexibility as you continue to work on your budget. March 3rd is the date that I have to press the button in the state system to submit these exceptions. After that, it's up to the Commonwealth, the Department of Education, to review those referendum exceptions and let us know whether we get approval or not. Let me look at my calendar here. That is March 23rd then. So the state will have 20 days to issue a ruling on those referendum exceptions. After the submission on the 3rd, we're pretty much on track for our normal budgeting season, so to speak. We have to adopt a tentative budget by the end of May, and of course a final budget by the end of June. Not this week, but next week, Governor Corbett will be presenting his first draft of the state budget, and then after he presents his budget, we'll have a better picture, a better handle on the state revenues that are obviously so critical for our purposes.
Mr. Marnell, how many mills are involved in the exceptions, if all are granted?
As I passed out at a prior meeting, we're looking at 8.8 mills. That would be 7.8 mills in the allowable exceptions, plus the 1 mill allowed under the Act 1 index comes to a total of 8.8 mills. So the exceptions, that part of it is 7.8. So obviously between the 16.5 down to 8.8, we have some, as one individual mentioned, we have some whittling to do to get down to that number.
Mr. Marnell, the numbers you used for the state reimbursement, that was with 08, 07, 08 numbers, or 08, 09, do you remember?
Actually, the number that I used for next year is that portion of our state subsidy this year that is purely state dollars, the $5,051,000, which is lower than the 0809 number that we did receive, or even I think somebody mentioned that possibly they were going to roll it back to 0708. We're not sure what target they're shooting for, but I think I've been conservative using the $5,051,000, and looking at literature that came out either last week or 2 weeks ago. If they would roll it back to, let's say, the 0708 or 0809, again, don't hold me to this, and certainly don't write any checks, but we could actually see an increase in that state category. But again, we can't assume anything until the governor makes a budget presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.